Good job, RJ.
All right.
Well, marijuana really ramped up this week. I was getting with some of the rest of the Rural Medical Marijuana Coalition and or whatever we call ourselves. And because we have no bills signed by the governor yet on marijuana. And both chambers of the legislature have talked about it being a priority, wanting to do something on it. And here we are with likely only 2 weeks left of session, and none of them are sitting on the governor's desk. So I don't know if that's because they can't agree or if that's because I don't know what. But so we made it a priority the end of the last couple of days to get with House and Senate leadership and hopefully be the people that cut the deal on getting something done with marijuana. I think the rural members of the legislature need something done on marijuana, especially the ones that have elections. I mean, there's nothing more. I was just talking to a candidate this morning, a candidate in Guthrie for an open seat. And I said, what are people talking about on the doorsteps outside of the social issues, the federal social issues? He's like, well, marijuana. I said, well, this is not even really a rural district anymore because you get most of Guthrie and then that seat goes into Edmond. And then that's all the people he represents. It doesn't even get the rural parts of Logan County really. And he's hearing about it. So the rural folks are really, really getting hammered at home. They've got to pass something. But if leadership is hindering them from doing that, they're going to get their members in trouble. So this is a list of bills that the coalition came up with early that had a lot of good momentum. All these things were moving through the process and looked like they were going to pass easy. And then there were versions on the House side and the Senate side, and now they're all in conference committee, I believe. And so now we've got 2 weeks to get the language right and get them passed and done to the governor. So that's kind of the lay of the land at the moment. And I'll just kind of go through these and give a little bit of status on what's going on. So this first one is the House leadership is calling this the mortgage bill. It requires medical marijuana businesses to obtain certain permits, certificates, registrations from local government entities prior to licensure. So before you get a mortgage, you have to get all these different things. You got to get tax returns, you got to get, all those things. So that's why they're calling this a mortgage bill. But basically, the Senate version is very light and easy, and it basically just says you have to get a couple of different permits before we grant you your OMMA permit. And then the House version was like requiring, it requires liability insurance, workers' comp insurance, a plethora of different things. Now, I think we're for either or as a group, but the more strict, I think, the better. So if we could get some of the things that were in the House bill into the Senate bill is the one that's still alive. If we can get some of those into that, but I think we'll be supportive no matter what version of that comes out, just because it makes them more legitimate and it helps us crack down on, it helps the state crack down on the illegal operations.
What's
Number two,
what's more likely to, is the stripped down version just stripped down because it's more likely to get through?
I think there's some members of the Senate that thought the House version was too strict, but I think the House thinks the Senate version doesn't have enough. I think probably what we're going to end up with is a hybrid, but I think one of those gets done.
Okay.
So, yeah. The Senate bill will be the one that goes because it's the only one that's still alive. The House one died, but conference committee, anything can happen.
Right.
Senate Bill 1737 requires medical marijuana commercial grower licensees to post certain identification and contact information in a conspicuous and viewable location at the entrance of the commercial grow operation. We got the language right on this bill in the House, and this one was going to go. Except for our House author forgot to put the title back on when he forgot to take up the amendment on the floor to put the title back on. So it passed without a title, therefore had to go to conference. So, which happened to be a good thing because now we have a vehicle to put the next one in, which is require medical marijuana grow operations to register as environmentally sensitive crops. That bill died because it didn't get heard on the floor. It got caught up in some politics with the other bill that we talked about that we didn't want to go. And so we are putting that language from 3827 that requires them to register with ODAF into 1737, in addition to the license, the sign, and just going to run those two deals together. So there was a little concern that might cause it to not pass, but I don't think so. I think that bill goes no matter what. So we'll see what happens there, but I think we get that deal done. They were working on it yesterday afternoon, getting the language put in that bill. So hopefully they get that done before Monday. The next one is just some type of reclamation. The bill that's out there requires them to acquire a bond of $25,000 for each license held, which is probably not enough, but it's a good start. And it's just so if for some reason the property is totally abandoned, then either the property owner, if they're leasing the property, or the county government or something can have that money to reclaim the land, basically. So it's get it back to a valuable piece of property. The next one is increased license fees. This one's probably the most politically challenging because of the different opinions on how we get there. The Senate passed a bill that said the minimum dollar amount is $100,000, but the minimum fee to obtain a license is $100,000. Well, the marijuana folks went nuts over that, which is just, I think, crazy too. But I think the more reasonable folks want a tiered system that starts at 5,000 rather than 2,500, which current licenses are 2,500. So double it, make the minimum license 5,000, go up to $100,000 license for these big outdoor grows, and then everything else be in between. I think one thing that we in the ag community certainly support is higher fees for outdoor grows. One, they just cause more problems to surrounding people, but also they're harder to inspect. They're, the things that you have to do when you're getting permits and things like that for outdoor grows, there's more things required. So I think it should be that way, where outdoor grows cost more and to get a license. But it should be based on, time for inspection and the amount of money it takes to enforce that law, or to enforce and inspect and all of that. So it should match that, just like any other industry. The next one is one I think the group kind of went back and forth on whether we supported. We put this list together. We edited it yesterday, and before we started showing legislators, we wanted one thing on this list that we were okay with taking off. So that, if they said you can't have all this, which one do you not want? So we put the moratorium on there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The House really wants a moratorium. When talking to leadership, we just said, if you do a moratorium, give OMMA the authority to do one. Don't do a legislative moratorium, Because then to lift the moratorium, you got to come back in and pass another bill.
Yeah.
So basically that was just us giving our preference on that. And, we told them that our view is we don't want to be hypocritical because we're not necessarily for moratoriums in our industry. So,
I think that makes sense.
but given the agency the ability to do a moratorium, the one of the reasons they wanted to do that was so that there wasn't a flood to get licenses when people figured out that fees were going up or something like that.
Yeah.
So they want to try to pass that with an emergency first, and then the rest of the laws go into effect.
That makes sense.
The last one is kind of a last minute ad, and the reason we added it was because the House leadership asked us to put that on our asks. But we really need to still meet with the utilities before we push this one real hard. But this would ask the utilities to report usage information. The reason they want this is so that if you come in and get a permit for 500 plants, but you're using enough electricity and water for 5,000, they know, oh, we need to go investigate that. So every other state that has a robust marijuana industry has something like that. So it's just a help with catching people that are skirting the law.
So is that only public utilities that are going to require that of rural electrics as well?
I believe that rural electrics are included in that.
Okay.
Makes sense. Since they would have a bunch of them, you would think that they would be included.
And I don't know where they're at on that.
Okay.
I think they probably, because it's probably more work on their end, but I don't know. They might be opposed. So
Yeah.
that might be something we need to talk about, RJ.
Was there any concern about Stitt just not doing anything because it's an election in year and all that crap? Just not touching it?
Well, if he
Now,
wants,
Stitt is all in and wants to do something.
Okay.
I think that it's a liability if he does nothing, be honest.
I
I
agree.
think so too. But
We saw some message testing that Joy was running, and it was, Governor Stitt has done nothing on marijuana. I mean,
yeah,
it's not a wrong statement, but
yeah, that makes sense.
so like I said, the reason we added that bottom one was more just to basically get the House on board with supporting the rest of the things we wanted to get done. I think the bottom two are things that when we go to the Senate, we'll say, we don't necessarily care to have these, but we want everything else. Just gives us some negotiating power.
Yeah.
So,
okay, I like that. I can't remember the guy's name, but the lawyer guy who was on a couple weeks ago and was stressing about liability of posting signs, did that go any, did anybody else have similar concerns like that, or was that just kind of him as a cattle farmer, local farmer?
I think we all have talked about that, but I think the other point that was made on that call was that you're liable whether you know it's there or not.
Yep.
So you might as well know it's there.
And
Exactly.
and
No,
we-
That's kind of the stance that all of us have taken.
That's
Yeah.
my perspective as well. You don't need to have a sign posted to get hammered on drift liability. You're going to get hammered on drift liability no matter what.
yeah, and we had talked about that prior to that call. I mean, about the liability piece with Brendan. So we kind of knew that, but we weren't going to convince him otherwise. You know what I mean?
Right.
And with him being, I mean, and again, I appreciate him bringing all his concerns. I mean, that's what we want him to do. But
Right.
And I appreciate the farmers' concerns because there is a real risk that that they couldn't get their stuff sprayed.
Yeah.
So,
I think that's legitimate. But the whole trying to basically take out or negate liability for them if they're not federally insurable or whatever, that never happened. That wasn't ever really pushed. Right.
Well, no, not by us.
no, the rest of the group wants it, I think.
Well, Michael and Steve both with Cattleman and Farm Bureau both backed off hard after they realized what it did. And that's the thing, like Piper, every time I've talked to Piper since, and he's like, just thank you for telling me what that bill was doing, because none of us knew exactly, and we would have got ate alive for running that bill.
Yeah, and Jeff and I had a long conversation about it. We finally talked yesterday. Not sure where we wound up on it, but we finally talked about it yesterday.
Cool. Good deal. What about the one thing I'm somewhat interested in is rural broadband. Is there anything at all going on with that?
Yes, let me pull up a bill real quick.
Your tabs stress me out. I'm sorry.
What?
I couldn't do that. Your tabs stress me out. I can't have that. If I have more than like 3 tabs up, it bothers
Oh
me.
yeah. That's my life. What was your question about?
Rural broadband.
Nope, not that one. Let me find the bill number real quick. Basically, there was an agreement on pole attachments that some of the broadband providers say will help them a lot.
I just read about that in my Rural Electric Cooperative magazine last night. I can't remember the number.
Well, you should have read about it earlier than that in my weekly email.
Well, I've got your weekly email. Give me just a second. I hadn't read it. I didn't get your weekly email till this morning, but
No, I meant in a couple weeks ago.
was it like 3855 or something?
3855. That's what I just looked up. It's not 38. That's around it.
Oh, that's what you just looked up. Literally just looked up. So yeah, I didn't see that, but yeah, that's funny. That's what I thought it was, but
Yeah. I'll find it here.
okay.
Look. 3835.
Okay. Off one number.
I guess this is a big long bill. The governor signed this bill, but see
And
how
this
many pages it is.
This is a bill we've kind of
Oh.
semi been involved with the last several years. Is this a Tyler
Oh.
bill?
This is all new law. Yeah. Basically, this bill put into law what happens when they can't come to an agreement on a pole attachment fee. Public utilities have to go to they revert back to the FEC,
Yes.
the FEC formula. If they can't come to an agreement on somebody wanting to attach to a public utility in Oklahoma, it goes back to the FEC formula. Well, rural cooperatives are not a public utility, or they're not regulated like a public utility. So there wasn't any means for that other than just regular old mediation or whatever on trying to figure something out. And if they couldn't come up with something, then there was no attachment. So basically all the providers in the state have been trying to run a bill for the past 4 years that locked the co-ops into a certain rate if they couldn't come to they wanted to go to the FEC formula. Well, that's not quite economical for the electric cooperatives. So they came up with a different formula and then put that into law so that if you can't come to an agreement between a broadband provider and a rural electric co-op on attaching to their pole, then it goes to this formula. So It would have been in your update the last couple of weeks. I don't know if it was in there this week because it got signed this week. I don't usually put it in there if it got signed, but I do as it's working its way through the legislative process. So, and it'll definitely be in the legislative wrap up for the year
Gotcha.
if you want to read the whole bill. The other thing is that the ARPA dollars, American Rescue Plan Act,
Mhm.
the state is still sitting on 1.9 billion from the federal government. Most states have already sent that money out. Our process is totally different from the rest of the states. There's a legislative committee that then makes recommendations to the governor, but the governor has final say on. The legislature wants to commit like a third of that money to broadband projects, rural broadband projects. But then there's some additional money from the federal government just for rural broadband. So I think you're going to see a heavy investment from some of these federal funds. I don't know which pot of money they're going to use, but the state will designate a lot of this federal money to go out to be used for rural broadband projects. It might be just a little bigger than a drop in the bucket, but anything's better than nothing.
Yeah.
So, and then I think there's still a lot of people in the state that are maximizing money they got from COVID and money that is available through USDA and being very progressive in taking advantage of those dollars.
Yeah.
So,
Gotcha.
yep. So they're doing some things. There's not necessarily a lot of bills that deal with it because they're going to try to direct a lot of that federal money
Gotcha.
to some broadband projects.
Cool. Sounds good to me. Sorry that I'm the only one here hanging out.
We're just glad you are.
Wait a minute, I'm here with you.
Oh yeah,
Kevin.
yeah, you're here. How are you doing, Randy?
Good,
Long,
good.
long time no see.
Yeah, long time no see. What, Wednesday?
Yeah. Randy and I sat at the table at the FFA convention, same table at the FFA convention the other day. So
Where, by the way, we were glad to say that Bray Haven was an honorary state FFA degree recipient. So congratulations, Bray.
Thanks, Randy.
what a cool dude that Bray. He's
What a cool dude he is. Yeah.
Well, you guys got all of the knowledge that I have for the day.
Ray, thanks for sharing your wisdom with us.
Absolutely. We really appreciate having Brave Capital. He really does a great job for us. Appreciate you getting on today, Bray, and kind of updating the folks on the call. Joe, do you have any questions? Take that as a no. Randy, do you have any?
No, just, I mean, the comment about real broadband is, probably if we learned anything in I would say the spring of 20, but the year of 20, we learned we need real broadband.
Absolutely.
I always try to take something positive out of the events that happen, and maybe that'll be the bright star of that one is, it'll help us in that respect.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Another thing that actually Randy and I kind of talked about the other day while we were at the convention was just the ability to attract young people to rural areas, and whether that's student loan forgiveness programs or anything like that that could be pumped into smaller communities to get a large animal vet was the topic of because the state officer that we're sitting with was going to be a vet and go to vet school. Is there ever, what discussions are out there, or what ideas have been floated around about trying to find ways to get people to come back to small towns or rural areas? Is that
I
a
think-
topic of conversation?
Yeah, I think that's talked about a lot. I think it's probably like the rest of us, and you got to have quality jobs.
Yeah,
So is it giving more people the opportunity to work from home? Is it using some of this ARPA money to create economic development in rural parts of the state? I think that is going to be another focus of the ARPA committee. And, and give some, on top of that, also give some tax incentives to people that do go back. A couple sessions ago, we passed a bill that was a big tax credit. If you're a doctor and you go practice in rural Oklahoma for 5 years, you can get a significant tax credit after you've completed that. And so looking at more things like that. The problem is right now, those things aren't advertised probably as much as they should be. And
that's kind of on the
expanding-
community, right?
Yeah.
The community needs to step up and promote those things and try and go out and get those people.
Yeah.
That's be my suggestion, my thought process.
Yeah.
We
exactly.
We actually said at the table with Cody and I was Dr. Denny, who's the interim state director for Career Tech, but also she's a veterinarian and works closely with Oklahoma State's vet school. And that was the push. She was actually trying to recruit one of the state officers, Kate McGowan, to go to vet school. Well, if there's some incentive for tuition or loan forgiveness for those students to be a large animal, real Oklahoma vet, whether it's a tax incentive, whether Cody had a good idea about the, those real communities stepping up to the plate and offering a program. Or Dr. Denny and I even talked about some of some of the drug suppliers, because they sell more animal veterinary medicine if there's a vet in town. So, some kind of loan forgiveness program for those vet schools students. But, we need one here as do most rural communities.
I think one of the other things that I would say is that probably like for young families and stuff, I think one of the biggest setbacks to rural towns is the school systems. I think that sometimes, like, we kind of had a conversation last night about how there's opportunities for students in larger school systems rather than in smaller ones, where you kind of have to dim your light whenever you're, if your kid learns at a higher level or anything like that. I think that getting the appropriate teachers, which obviously teachers are an issue everywhere, but getting the appropriate teachers and the funding and really investing back in those school systems to show those employers that are moving to small towns, like co-op managers or things like that, that there is opportunity for growth.
No, I agree. And that's I think that all of that is a priority for rural legislators. It's convincing our urban friends that there is need for government investment or government incentive for people to remain in rural areas. And part of that is the broadband piece that we talked about.
Right. That's going to be a huge deal, because if you can work from home in Fairview, you might be willing to move to Fairview and still keep your same job. Like, that makes a lot of sense.
Well, I think too, there's a lot of people that, and this is relevant to us, but there's a lot of people in our age bracket, Cody, that would have moved back to the farm and helped part-time if they could get a real job working from home.
Yeah.
Not saying
My farm can't
not a
support
real
us all.
job, but And that was not not saying farming's not a real job, but I think
Yeah,
it's hard for people our age to leave college and be able to take over the full farming operation when their parents are still living off of it as well.
yeah, exactly right.
And so,
One of the awareness issues for me is, I mean, this is very related to the real broadband. I would expect is whenever you look at the new congressional district 2, whenever you look at the scope and the size of that area, and then you look at Congressman Lucas's area, those are all based on population, number of people. Those 2 congressional districts take up probably 2/3 of the state of Oklahoma. But then you have a pocket in Tulsa and a pocket in Oklahoma City where you have more population. So I don't know. I think the broadband deal will certainly help that, but we can all see where there's a need for change. But Bray, I appreciate your efforts. Cody, it's good to visit with you, and I enjoy the lunch and learns just listening mostly.
thanks, Randy. You bet.
Yeah, I appreciate you being on anytime. Bray, as usual, sir, thank you so much. AJ, thanks for arranging this. Joe, Cody, Randy, thank you for your time today. I don't know if we have any more scheduled. AJ, can you confirm or deny that?
We do not have any more scheduled. We were going to stop this first week and then pick back up again in August, but we can go again in 2 weeks if that's the general consensus if we need to.
We may, we'll talk about that internally. We'll just see how we'll see how the legislative session wraps up. We may, but otherwise, I think we're going to plan on trying to kind of continue this back in August. Ordinarily, we just do it in the spring, but I think it's a good kind of way for our members to, we had better success early on in the spring, but I think we started back in the fall. We can continue to try to get more and more people on the calls. But thank you guys for being on the call today.
Yeah,
have
absolutely.
a great weekend and hope to see y'all soon.
Well, let me just let you know the last 10 minutes of it, House Ag Chairman Representative Curbs was here listening. So Dale, thanks for being involved and listening to the comments.
Absolutely.
Hey, Dale.
Hey, how are you guys doing?
Doing well.
Good.
Sounds good. You guys are all under control. That's what we like.
Yeah. Bray didn't tell any lies, did he?
No, not that I heard anyway. I mean, if he did, I'd just settle up with him.
Fair enough. All right,
It's
sir.
good to hear all you guys.
Likewise, man. You have a great weekend.
See ya.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Enjoy your
Bye.
Friday, everybody.
See ya.